Welcome to the Unfuck Your Fitness podcast. I am your host, Christy Castillo, and I'm here to give you real talk and cut the BS so you can actually enjoy building a body you love. I'm a personal trainer obsessed with giving you simple action steps to take you from feeling stuck to feeling sexy. Let's go. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to today's episode. Today we're going to be talking about some tips to help you make macro tracking simple. That's the goal anyway with this episode, is to give you a little bit of a different mindset around tracking macros, to give you some different tips, some different ways to do things. These are some very common things that I hear from my clients or in the DMs, questions, things like that. So I really took the common struggles, the common questions, the issues, the mindsets that I feel like kind of get people stuck sometimes. And also, let me just start by saying it took me many attempts at macro tracking to finally get it. I am a recovering perfectionist, so I had to really put my spin on macro tracking to make it be something that I would do long term. Everything that I say in this episode is tried and true, and it's tested by yours truly, not only on myself, but with my clients as well. And so I never want to come across as like I have all the answers, or this is super simple for me, or it's always been this way for me, that I always knew these tips, or that I always had this mindset around macro tracking, because it has not always been this way. So I want to just kind of start out by saying that what I'm going to say in this episode, you might hear some of it and say like, well, that's easy for you, Christy, or that's good for you to say, but this is a little harder for me, or whatever the case may be. And really what that comes down to is I've just been doing this longer. I've been doing this myself longer. I've been coaching my ladies longer. So I've been around macro tracking for quite a while. And not only macro tracking, because there's different ways, different coaches, different people, whatever you want to call us, different personal trainers will teach you things different ways. So this is my own tried and true tips and really my belief and really how I do things. So I just want to start by saying that this did not come easy for me. It has taken a long time for me to get to where I am, but I'm very proud to say that macro tracking is simple for me now. It is easy. It's easy for me to teach. It's easy for me to weave into my own life. It's easy for me to help my clients weave it into their own lives. And so this stuff really, really works. So the things that I'm going to say in this episode are really tangible tips, and I promise you they work. Now, they may take a little adjusting to, and it's not going to be like an instant success, like an overnight success kind of a thing, but it does work. So let me start off by saying, and as far as we're getting into the goods here, that your mindset matters. Your mindset when it comes to macros is probably the most important part of it. Yes, the tracking matters technically, and the calories and what you're eating, and of course each macro, like all of it matters. But if your mindset around macros is bad, if it's just if you're kind of dipping your toe in the water, or you don't really believe in it, or whatever, it matters. It really matters that you look at this from a different perspective. And so that is really, I want to kind of drill that in here in the beginning of this episode, because your mindset really, really matters. So many people view macro tracking as something that's super annoying or time consuming, or like I've tried that and didn't work, or why would I want to track macros for the rest of my life? Like, who wants to do that? It's so annoying to get my app out and take 2 whole minutes. When you really think of it, it's about 2 whole minutes out of your entire day. But if that's your mindset, that macro tracking is super annoying, it's so time consuming, blah, 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 then yeah, like number one, that's a really crappy mindset. So of course it's annoying if you say it's annoying. If you think macro tracking is going to be the most annoying thing you've done this year, then yeah, it will be the most annoying thing you've ever done. If you think macro tracking is just so time consuming and you think all these negative things about it, then yes, of course it's going to be that way. But in my opinion, it's not any more annoying than not eating bread or rice or cake or Oreos. To me, that is way more annoying. So realizing that macro tracking is going to be annoying if you think it's going to be annoying. And if you say that it's going to be annoying, it is, point blank. But if you look at it from a different perspective, as in, how do I want to say this? If you start looking at macros as, this is something that I'm going to have to do long term. No, you're not going to have to track every single morsel of food that you put in your mouth. And I'll get into this. But you're going to have to do some sort of macro tracking awareness intuitively, being aware of your macros long term, but that it's more than a diet. It's not even a diet, really. It's getting to know your body and understanding how to fuel it. And it's fixing your relationship with food. So there's so many different ways to look at it. It's not just putting your foods into an app and aiming for weight loss and, not understanding it. It's not just downloading MyFitnessPal and starting to scan the UPCs. Like that's not the magic. It doesn't come from just scanning the UPCs of the products in your home and putting them in the app and then not doing the work and not understanding it and all of that. So there's more that goes into it, but realize that this is the long-term game and this is the last thing you will ever have to do for your body as far as a diet is concerned if you do it correctly. So your mindset matters, and going into macro tracking, it's so helpful to start macro tracking with the right mindset so that it's less frustrating. So often, and like I said earlier, this was me multiple times before I started quote unquote my way of tracking. People track everything precisely. We're measuring every single thing. We're weighing every single thing. We're worried about every single detail of what we're tracking and what we're eating. And it takes the simplicity right out of it. And so that's why this episode is going to be helpful for me to make macro tracking more simple, more doable long-term. And I think you should start doing things in a way that is sustainable and a way that you won't have to quit. If you start tracking macros and you're weighing and again, this was me, and you are weighing every single morsel of food on a little food scale, it's okay to weigh some. It's okay to measure things. Of course, I'm not saying that you don't have to do any of that. But if you start out with a food scale and you're measuring every single thing and you're weighing every single thing that you put in your mouth, do you really think that that's sustainable long term? That's the same as cutting out bread forever. Do you really think that's sustainable long term for the rest of your life? No. And if you think you're going to add bread, if you're cutting out bread for 30, 60, 90 days because it's part of a certain diet, what do you think is going to happen when you add it back in? And if you do plan to add it back in, then why are you cutting it out in the first place? Unless it's for dietary issues, reasons, health issues, reasons, there's no sense in cutting out a food group, a food source that you just plan to add back in after the quote unquote diet is over. So I think start tracking your macros, to start doing this in a way that is actually sustainable, that you can see yourself doing most of the time long term, is great, because that way you won't have to quit. So this is long term, as in you should track on occasion for a long time, for years and years and years, so that you know if you're fueling your body correctly. Even now, sometimes I think I've done a pretty good job during the day. And when it gets to night time in the evening, I will enter my foods that I've eaten and I'm like, oh my God, I am so far off. So even, seasoned veterans like myself, macro tracking seasoned veterans as myself, we're not perfect. We don't know all of the things. And so it is good to realize that, yes, at first you will have to track everything, not weigh everything, not even measure everything, not do it perfectly, but you will have to track everything so that you can gain that awareness around it, so that you can track the food, see it in MyFitnessPal, see what it equals as far as calories, proteins, fats, and carbs, because that's the way that you learn. That's education. And so the more you do that, the more you start to see food for what it is as far as the calorie breakdown, the macronutrient breakdown, and it fixes your relationship with food and you start to understand it. So you don't have to track every single thing long term, but it's just like budgeting your money. As long as you are making money and spending money, you will have to track it because you will make some and you will spend some, and you will need to keep track of that for your financial health. Just like you are eating food and working out and, consuming calories, fuel, and expending calories, fuel, you will have to keep track of it because it does matter. It does add up inside of your body. And so you should look at this as something like, I'm going to have to do this long term, so I might as well figure out how to fit it into my lifestyle. So that is where your mindset really matters, and that's what it should look like coming into this process. So now let's talk about a few general rules that help when you're macro tracking. So these are a couple of tips. Keep in mind that number one, it doesn't need to be perfect. I always say this to my ladies when they're macro tracking, whether there's a food that they don't know how to input or whatever the case may be, done is better than perfect. Track it, move on. That leads me to number two, choose something close to the food that you want, track it, and move on. If there is a food that you have eaten and you want to log and you're typing it in, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but if you're typing it in and it's not coming up, or you have a really complicated recipe and you're really confused on how to get it in there, just choose a way, choose something close to the food that you want, track it, and move on. So done is better than perfect. Track it and move on. Those are two little mindset things that I'll tell myself sometimes when I'm getting kind of nitty gritty about what exactly did I eat, or is this the right brand of food that I'm logging? It doesn't matter. Done is better than perfect, Christy. Track it, move on. Number three is to plan ahead. Planning ahead is really, really helpful when tracking your food because the days can get away from us. So if you know what your week's going to look like and you have some free time on a Sunday evening, get in there. You can go to the next few days. If you know exactly what you're going to have for breakfast, lunch, snacks, or dinner on any of those days, log it while you're sitting there watching TV as a family. That's something that's just, kind of quick. You can do it kind of mindlessly, and it's good to have it in there and plan ahead. Number four, have some staple foods. Staple foods are just that, things that you're going to eat daily or often, or that you have on hand. So when it gets to the end of the day and you are short on a couple of different macros, you have some food options to throw in there. They are generally foods that you are aware of the macros of. You've eaten them often enough to know, like, okay, if I get this, it's going to give me 15 grams of protein, about 25 grams of carbs, 6 fats. I don't know, making that up. But you'll kind of know those foods. The more that you track them, the more you see that and you associate a certain food with a certain amount of macros, you'll know when you need to fill a certain amount of macros, you'll know what foods to plug in there. Number five, remember it's not perfect in the app or in real life, so don't aim for perfection. What I mean by this is when there are humans putting these numbers into the MyFitnessPal app. Sometimes they don't add up perfectly. Sometimes they're inputted wrong. Sometimes even if I am setting your macro goal for you as one of my clients, that's my best guess. I don't know you in person. I've never actually probably met you. And so I don't know exactly how many steps you are getting in a day. I don't know exactly how hard you're pushing yourself in your workout. I don't know exactly how active you are. I don't know exactly what you're putting in your mouth. You know what I mean? Like, this is all a best guess scenario, and it will be forever. And so trying to be exactly perfect on exactly the brand that you consumed or exact ingredients that you put into a recipe, it's all best guess anyway. My macro suggestion for you is best guess, especially in the beginning. Of course, I get to know you better and your body better as we work together. But in the beginning, it's all a best guess. These are apps. These, the calorie, like your Apple Watches and why can't I think of the word? Fitbit. They're all estimates. This is all estimates. And so trying to be exactly perfect with something that's basically an estimate is just driving you more crazy than it needs to be. Number six, it's the weekly average that counts the most. You can make up day by day. If you go over, 50 carbs on Tuesday, try to stay under 50 carbs on Wednesday. Your body doesn't know. My clients find this very helpful, and so did I. Your body doesn't know that it's midnight to midnight. Your body doesn't know what day it is. It's the overall average that your body really goes by. And so if you completely screw up, fall off track one day, get it, get your mindset right, get back on track, fix it the next day. Not a huge deal, not a huge deal. Your body is going to adjust. Number 7, this is a pretty common question that I get. If you have leftover macros at the end of the day and you are not hungry at all, don't eat. I get that a lot. Like, Christy, I have all these macros left over, but I'm pretty new to this. I'm not hungry. This is a lot more calories than I'm used to eating. What do I do? Do I stuff myself and try to hit those macros, or do I just kind of let it go? I suggest letting it go, especially in the beginning. Your body will change as you increase workouts and you increase your calories. Your body is smart. Your metabolism will start to rev up. Your hunger will increase, especially as you continue lifting and you gain muscle. And I don't suggest shoving food in your mouth just to make yourself sick. That's not a good relationship with food. So if you do have macros left at the end of the day and you are not hungry, trust your body, because the next day you could be savagely hungry and you could eat those calories on that day and it will balance out. If you do have a few unbalanced macros left over at the end of the day and you are kind of hungry, try to fill them. It might take some strange combinations of food, but that's kind of part of the fun. Now, here's where we keep it simple. And these are some actual questions that I get very, very often. So, how do I log something like meat or rice? Do I log it cooked or uncooked? As long as you log it the same way, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Just make sure you are choosing the option in MyFitnessPal that reflects what you are measuring or inputting. So make sure let me say this first. I personally don't weigh my food. I started out weighing my food when I was doing macros a long time ago. And I thought, fuck this. I'm not doing this. I'm not weighing my food unless I wanted to prep for a bodybuilding competition or a show or really dial back. I'm probably mentally more in a place to do that now. My relationship with food is great. But in the beginning, it was not, and that was not helping me. So I personally do not weigh my food. I measure it. I eyeball it a lot, to be honest, at this point. But when I do, I always measure it cooked or log it cooked. That goes for anything. I always make the rice and then we'll measure out a half cup or whatever. As far as chicken, like same thing. I always cook the meat and then I measure it out cooked. So as long as you are consistent in the way you are logging it, that's fine. That's what I personally do. I'm a firm believer, again, that you should do things in a way you can do long term. And this is absolutely no exception. So to recap, as long as you are doing it consistently, I don't care if you do it uncooked or cooked. I don't care if you weigh. I don't care if you measure. Just make sure you're picking the appropriate option in MyFitnessPal that reflects what you are doing. Another question I get is how to track homemade foods with multiple ingredients like pizza, like pasta dishes, casseroles, chili, etc. Chili is one that I use a lot. So I suggest searching. I shouldn't say that. Chili is not something that I eat a lot. It's an example that I use a lot. I suggest searching in the search bar in MyFitnessPal and finding something close. Chances are someone or a restaurant has saved a recipe in there close to your recipe. Choose one, move on, right? Log it, move on. Done is better than perfect. So whenever I have chili, I will type in chili. I will log the Wendy's restaurant version and track it and move on. So always type something in the MyFitnessPal search bar and see what comes up. If you are eating pizza, type in pizza. If you are eating manicotti as far as a pasta dish, type that in there and see what comes up. If nothing comes up, you can use a recipe for those things as well. So like soups, casseroles, MyFitnessPal has a recipe section where you can plug in the URL of a recipe online. So if you're making a recipe from the internet, copy the URL and see if you can paste that into MyFitnessPal and see if it pops up. If not, you can always go to Pinterest, search in whatever you're making and try to find that URL that will plug into MyFitnessPal. If that is too much of a pain in the ass, then like I said, just search in there, choose one, log it and move on. That's personally what I do. I am not going to waste my precious time copying and pasting a million URLs. I might try that 3-4 times. After that, I am done. And I will just be like, well, I assume that's about 20 grams of protein and I'm moving on for the day. Sometimes I even do that mentally or input a fake recipe, whatever. I like simple, if you haven't noticed. Another question that I get is, do I count net carbs? So my first answer to that, of course, is when you log something into MyFitnessPal, it's going to be logged in there a certain way. I prefer that you do not count net carbs. I want you to count all of the carbs. So if you're not familiar with net carbs, what that is net carbs refers to carbs that are actually absorbed by your body. So to calculate the net carbs in whole foods, you subtract the fiber from the total number of carbs. To calculate net carbs in processed foods, you subtract the fiber and a portion of the sugar alcohols from the total number of carbs. Does this sound like something that I am going to do? If you know me at all, the answer is no. And also, I don't want you to count net carbs because I want you to count all the carbs. You consumed all of the carbs listed in that food. So net carbs do matter for other reasons, but not when you're figuring this out for overall fitness. Again, keep it freaking simple. Another thing I want to make super, super clear is that not logging something doesn't mean you didn't eat it. I have so many clients that just simply won't log a day of eating because it's not a normal day of eating. Let's take 4th of July, for example. I had a lot of clients that were like, I'm not even going to log the 4th of July. I don't want you to see it. And I totally understand this mindset. Like, it's not something they want me to take into consideration. And honestly, I'm smart, okay? I know that when I'm looking at your 4th of July food logs, either the 4th of July, the exact day, or I'm sure that my international friends did not have this 4th of July problem, but bear with me. On a day where it's, a holiday, I'm not going to look at that day of food and be like, wow, you really went overboard, or even the day before or 2 days before, because celebrating things is going to cause you to eat in a different way, and it should. But I don't want you to get in the habit of just not tracking certain days of foods because you don't want to see what it was, or like, I know I went over by so many calories, so what's the point? The point is that you log it because it's a habit and you need to do that. The other point is that you ate the food. So just because you don't log it doesn't mean that it doesn't count. And the third reason being that you're allowed to have days where you go over. Like I said earlier, if you're going over on one day, go over the next day. If you overate by a shit ton of calories yesterday, whatever that day is for you, right? Chances are today you're not going to be as hungry. So your body is smart. Trust it. It's going to balance out, but log the food. I feel like that's just a mindset of like, well, I didn't do things perfectly, or I didn't do as good as I wanted, so I'm not going to log it, like it doesn't count. It still counts. So that's something that I just want to bring to your awareness. I want you to log things, whether you sucked one day or whether you did great, because that's information that you need. It's, like I said, habits that you need. And for me as your coach, if I'm coaching you, I need to see your good days and bad days. You can't just say like, I didn't log it because it was a bad day or it was a day that's not normal. Yes, I know, but you still ate the food. And so in 4 days, when you come to me and you're like, oh my God, I gained like 3-4 pounds over this week, I don't know what happened. Well, I can look back and say like, well, I know what happened. Tuesday happened. You know what I mean? So it has to be there. It's knowledge, it's facts, it's numbers, it's calories. It adds up. Like, it all matters. You can't just not log in, pretend like it didn't happen. So make sure that you are logging foods, even if you regret it right afterwards. You have to log it. Now I want to just leave you with some more real talk. Macro tracking isn't a diet. Remember, this is feeding your body. It takes time. It's the healthy way, and it doesn't need to be done perfectly. This is a different way of doing things, and it's going to feel different. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be exact, but you do have to put in a lot of effort. Most diets work, quote unquote, work until you quit them. I was so sick of either thinking that I had to follow a diet forever for it to be able to work, obviously, or knowing that the weight was coming right back on once I stopped the diet, right? So either I'm going to have to do this diet forever, or as soon as I stop doing this diet, I'm not going to be happy with myself. Again, the weight's coming back on, or I'm going to feel bad, or I'm going to be bloated, whatever it is. I got so sick of feeling like that whatever macro tracking, whatever it was going to take to figure out macros, macro tracking, the way of living like this, I was going to figure it out. Because the premise is, since diets work until you quit them, the diet after the diet is where you fail. The diet, we all say like, oh, that diet worked, low carb works for me. Keto works for me. Yeah, of course it works for you while you're on it. The problem is that you can't stay on it. The problem is that it's not long-term. It's not even healthy for you to stay on it long-term. You shouldn't. So it's not the diet. The diet is the problem, but the diet is not the problem as far as putting the weight back on. It's the plan after the diet is where you failed. When you start a diet thinking that you are only you only have to focus on that diet for the duration of that diet, I guess, right? When you start a diet and you're like, oh, this is only a 30, 60, 90 day situation. I only have to cut out sugar or carbs or processed foods or whatever for 30 to 60, 90 days. You're only thinking within that window. When you get to the end of that 30, 60, 90 days, then what? Have you planned ahead? Do you know what's going to happen after that? I mean, you do know because you're going to start incorporating those foods back in. And you're going to put all the weight back on, you're going to feel like shit. So this is why it's important to have a long-term plan. This is why it's important to understand your body, to fuel your body, to realize this is long-term, to realize that diets are going to work while you're on them, unless you want to live on that diet forever, which I very highly do not recommend. Then what else is going to work? What is your other option? And the answer to that is macros, because it's not a diet. It's figuring out your body. It's figuring out how to eat, how to fuel your body, how to maintain the body that you have, or how to improve on your body and then maintain that body. So that's why it's so important to have a long-term plan. And that's why these tips are so important, because this is long-term and I want you to have the mindset of it being long-term. And with that mindset comes doing things differently. You no longer have to track things perfectly. You no longer have to have the exact measurements, the exact weights of the foods, because this is long term. If you mess up one day, fix it the next day. If you have an off week and you're going on vacation, get back on track the next week. It is what it is. And so this is just a completely different way of looking at things. And I can't tell you right now in this episode, because I need to wrap it up. It would take me too long to tell you how many ways macro tracking has changed my life and my mentality and my body. I can't even explain to you right now in words how much this will benefit you if you just go for it, if you just let loose a little bit, if you just trust the process and have a long-term plan and a coach or a mentor or a personal trainer, whatever you want to call the person that you're getting help from, someone that you trust to guide you. But just know this is going to be a different process than probably what your friends are doing, than what you're used to. But it's so much better on the other side of this. So I hope this really helped you to look at macro tracking in a different way. I hope these tips, these different mindsets, these different quotes really helped you. I know these aren't tangible, like, well, this tip will help you and this tip will help you, but I hope you know by now that's not how I work. I want you to really grasp these things. I want these things to be doable, realistic, and things that pop into your head, like track it and move on. When you're tracking something you don't love in MyFitnessPal and you're like, this isn't the exact recipe, but Christy said track it and move on, right? Done is better than perfect. I want you to remember those little quotes and live by them just like I do. So I hope you enjoyed this episode so much. I will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to today's show. Go ahead and leave a rating and a review. And of course, follow the podcast so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And I would love it so much if you came to connect with me over on Instagram at Christy Castillo Fit. I will see you next time.